فيش لحوم نهائيا في السوق، فيش أي نوع مصدر للبروتين. المعلبات تقريبا خلصت في السوق، فيش غذاء نهائيا، يعني حتى الأطفال السالمين، الأطفال بدون أي أمراض مزمنة.
Gaza is in a crisis right now, as the blockade has been depleting supplies, not allowing humanitarian aid to come in. There's been no water, fuel, food, to the point where hospitals are being forced to close down, while kitchens are leaving, causing the starvation of the people of Gaza to only reach higher levels, as Israel is determined to cut off these basic necessities to the innocent people and to the children of Gaza.
Netanyahu's extremist government talks openly about using humanitarian aid as a weapon. Defense Minister Israel Katz said, quote, Israel's policy is clear. No humanitarian aid will enter Gaza, and blocking this aid is one of the main pressure levers, end of quote. Mr. President, starving children to death as a weapon of war is a clear violation of the Geneva Convention, the Foreign Assistance Act, and basic human decency.
We believe that the scale and severity of breaches of international humanitarian law that Israel is carrying out inside of Gaza, could constitute war crimes.
The Israeli government did not respond to those allegations.
The US-based humanitarian organization World Central Kitchen has been forced to cease its operation in Gaza due to depleted supplies and the inability to bring in additional aid. The shutdown has resulted in the loss of approximately 400,000 to 500,000 free meals per day, exacerbating the hunger crisis among Gaza's 2.3 million residents.
Local health officials say at least 57 children have already died from hunger-related complications. Soup kitchens are failing. Dozens have shut down. The rest are forced to ration what little they have.
What the family are mostly telling me is that without the tekiah, they have no food. This is sometimes the only meal that they have is relying on this hot meal and this kitchen. If they close, what's left?
In Gaza, food has become a matter of life or death. And for children like Rahaf, time is quickly running out.
In response to the suffering of Gaza, with humanitarian aid supplies depleting, that means food shortages and starvation has reached all-time high, and then also you have hospitals that are not able to function effectively because of fuel and because of medicine supply shortages. In response to this, Red Cross has actually issued a statement. Governments must act now to stop the horrors in Gaza. The Director General of the Red Cross said on Thursday, adding that the suffering there was reaching a point where it questions the very foundation of our humanity.
Firstly, I want to ask, do you have teams on the ground in Gaza? And if so, what are they telling you?
Yes, we have 70 staff on the ground in Gaza. What they are telling us is that the situation is just deteriorating day by day, minute by minute. We have, as of yesterday, completely depleted our stocks of humanitarian supplies. We distributed the last of our shelter and hygiene materials. We have been out of tents for weeks now as this 2-month-long siege has continued, preventing any aid from entering Gaza. Our staff are telling us about people going hungry, people looking for food, water, medicine, shelter. We've had over 400,000 people displaced since Israel broke the ceasefire back in March. And so long as this continues, the situation is only bound to get worse. We desperately need these crossings to be opened and aid to be restored.
In response to the crisis that we're seeing in Gaza and to the alarming amount of voices that have been raised with Democrats like Bernie Sanders or organizations begging for some type of global interference, international interference to help the people in Gaza, it's a US-backed initiative. It's called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the idea of it, it's going to be private, so it's not government function, which that in itself is raising some concerns. What does this mean for the citizens Are they going to have to be searched through IDF? Is this putting them through risk? We don't know all the details yet. That's still coming out. In fact, I'm going to be covering what one Israeli ambassador or U.S. ambassador in Israel is saying about the humanitarian aid that is backed by U.S. But the idea is that they're going to have destination hubs where they're going to be able to serve some of this aid. However, there are concerns that this can be a way to politicize things. There's also other concerns regarding how far away it is from some of the denser population, and that could mean a very long walk, which it's not safe, and it's also for some people they're not able to do it because of injuries, or when you are in the process of starvation, your body becomes weaker. So there's a lot of questions and concerns regarding this.
What this plan proposes to do is set up what's called, I put this in quotes, my quotes, logistics hubs. That is centralized checkpoints, which would be overseen by Israel, that would subcontract to private firms. Private companies would basically, not the UN, not aid agencies, which have a lot of experience, decades of experience doing this type of thing. Private firms, unknown at this point in time, would be handling the distribution at distribution points. Now, given what I said in the first answer, Annette, how do the Palestinians get to these logistics hubs, even presuming that, that the companies giving them out will have the food at hand? This is the problem. They say, aid organizations say this plan won't work. It will make things worse, a catastrophic situation even more catastrophic, even more dire. You need to get the food to Palestinian civilians where the Palestinians are, not displace them further and make them have to go to these logistics hubs. Who knows how they would even begin to try to get there?
Recent developments, the Israeli government agreed to go ahead and try to mobilize all of Gaza and take the territory. I'm going to show you a clip in a little bit just to give you more insight on what's going on.
Well, John, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that Israel's plan is to now capture all of the Gaza Strip, that this offensive will be, in his words, intensive, and that Israeli troops will remain in the devastated Palestinian territory for an unspecified length of time. Now, Israeli government ministers unanimously approved plans for the new offensive just hours after it was announced that tens of thousands of reserve soldiers are also being called up. Now, all of this comes after 19 months of brutal violence in Gaza, which has seen over 50,000 Palestinians killed. Now, in that time, the Israeli military has also failed to achieve its goal of destroying Hamas or returning all the hostages, with critics inside Israel, including hostage families, saying this new plan will not achieve either of those goals and will only cost, in their words, more blood.
With the idea of the military now trying to occupy Gaza, there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen with the over 2 million residents in Gaza who are going to be displaced probably for the 12th time. Where are they going to go? Is there any plans for that, or are they just on their own? Are they going to go to a refugee camp? Are there even enough camps to hold this many amount of people? So there's a lot of questions. And then regarding the hostage situation, there's concerns regarding that too. Donald Trump recently talked about how there are 3 hostages dead. He did that a couple of days ago.
I now correct, I say 21 because as of today it's 21. 3 have died.
Donald Trump's announcement that 3 hostages had died was a shock not only to the world, but to the loved ones and the family members of these hostages. In fact, they had no clue that the number of living hostages had depleted. In fact, the Israeli government persistently said there were 24 living hostages left. In fact, that number was really 21. This, of course, caused an outcry, with many people, including the family members, begging for transparency from the Israeli government and also asking for a renegotiation, for a ceasefire to stop the operation and to go back to negotiating with Hamas so that way they have a better chance of seeing their loved ones.
But essentially their thinking excludes the hostage families, because the Hostage Family Forum, who's been extremely vocal and present and visible throughout this war, they basically say, essentially, in not so many words, that they think this is almost a death sentence for the remaining hostages, this type of plan. If the Israeli government really cared about their missing relatives, their loved ones, then they would do everything to make that the top priority, not ramping up the war, which threatens to make it even more perilous, more treacherous for the hostages still remaining there.
I think there's a lot of questions and concerns about why the Israeli government is deciding to resume operations again and also take over the Gaza Strip. They claim it's a negotiating tactic as a way to secure the release of all the hostages. However, as both the family members have pointed out and others have pointed out, this is just putting them in harm's way, mobilizing all of Gaza, sending more airstrikes in, doing more raids. That's just putting everyone in danger, both the innocent people of Gaza and also the hostages as well. The next thing, or the other reason that Benjamin might say is why Israel is starting again with the raids or trying to mobilize Gaza, is a way to defeat Hamas. This war has been going on for about 19 months, with hundreds of thousands of Israeli soldiers, and still, after 54,000 Palestinians dead, anywhere from 13 to 15,000 children killed, Hamas is still there. So the idea that now with only tens of thousands getting these reservists to now fight, well, suddenly that would be what defeats Hamas. That's not going to work. You can't continue to use the same tactic over and over and over again and think you're going to get a different result. That's insanity. And that's what we're seeing right now. So there's a lot of questions on what's the real motivation behind it. Is he listening to other cabinet members that they've really wanted to occupy Gaza this entire time and they're using this as a way to do it? Or does he truly believe this is the only way to defeat Hamas? Either way, I will continue to keep you updated as I find more information, especially what's going on with the humanitarian aid, the plan that Israel has, a plan that U.S. has, or the U.S.-backed plan where they're using private sectors, trying to understand what that all entails, and I'll give you more updates with that. Also, I will be talking about what's happening with India and Pakistan as well. I'm sorry, quick edit here. What's happening in Gaza, starvation, the lack of medical supplies, the airstrikes that are killing civilians, innocent people, including children, is extremely concerning. Also, the lives of the hostages are being at risk with this plan as well, and I think that is our due diligence and our moral obligation to use our voices, to talk to representatives, to make sure that the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza's voices are uplifted, that they're heard. So I'm going to try to put resources in the description to see what you can do, see what I can do to do our best to help the people of Gaza.